Today we are going to taste test every single variety of squash that you can see behind me here. This is my 2025 squash harvest. There are close to 200 squash in this truck. When I did the first picking, I think we counted 189, but we've pulled more squash out of the garden since then. We are going to pick one of each variety of squash and pumpkin that you can see behind me here, bring them up to the house, roast them up, and taste test them. Now, of course, this taste test is going to be based on my taste preferences, but I will do my best to share with you texture, flavor, storageability, and different recipes that you can cook with each one. So by the end of this video, you should have a really good idea of what kind of squash or pumpkins you want to grow in your garden in 2026. If you would like to learn how to grow squash like this, I would encourage you to join us for our second annual garden harvest party that we're going to be holding over Zoom in October, and it is completely free. All you have to do to sign up for it is to click the link below, and it's an opportunity for me to see you and you to be able to interact with me and ask all of your gardening, preserving, and cooking from scratch questions. This is going to be an exciting call. I cannot wait to meet with you. So if you want to register, just click the link below this video in the show notes or in the pinned comment. I will meet you back up at the house when we have all these squash and we'll get them roasting. Yesterday, when we brought all the squash up to the house, we actually decided to get all the squash moved into storage because it looks like it's going to be dipping down close to freezing within the next week. So I just decided, since I was down there organizing all the squash and bringing squash up here for this taste test, that we'd get the rest moved too. So all I have left down there in the truck now is the pumpkins, and I am gonna have to figure out what to do with all those pumpkins. I am planning on moving some of the pumpkins up to decorate the deck, but because it's going to be freezing, usually those pumpkins don't last very long and then they end up going out to the chickens. So I still have to organize the pumpkins and decide which ones I'm going to be putting into storage. But what you can see in front of us here is a bunch of cut in half squash. Dan came and cut all these squash in half for me. And in the case of this giant, beautiful green Hubbard squash, he cut it into quarters for me. Look at the size of this one piece. That is just crazy. This is a lot of squash, and you're probably wondering what the heck I am going to do with this much squash once we're done the taste test. So the plan for the taste test is taking just a small chunk from each one. This is a small chunk relative to the big size of this Hubbard, but I'll be cutting off a smaller piece out of each one of these squashes and then cooking those up. We'll be taste testing that way. I'm gonna have to be careful when I put them in so that I can identify each one. But the rest of these squash I will be roasting up and pureeing and then freeze drying and freezing it. It isn't recommended to can squash puree or pumpkin puree. I know lots of people do because I hear about that in the comment section every time I mention it. The reason that it's not considered safe for home canning is because squash has different kinds of density, and the people that test this kind of stuff, it would have been probably impossible to test every single density of every single squash to be able to come up with a time where there would be even heat penetration all the way through the squash, no matter what the density. That's what I'm assuming why it's not recommended, is based on that heat penetration and being able to guarantee a safe product in the end. So it's recommended to freeze it. And the reason that, or to either freeze dry it or freeze dry it, or freeze it. But the reason that you can buy canned pumpkin puree at the grocery stores, because they obviously have much higher tech equipment than we have in our home kitchens, and they're able to make sure that there's the correct heat penetration. They probably have methods for testing to make sure that that's happening with every batch and all of that kind of stuff. So that is the reason why I don't do it. And honestly, frozen puree and freeze-dried puree, I actually think are superior to the pressure canned puree anyway, because you don't have all of that change in the chemical structure by the intense heating of pressure canning. So it's my preferred method either way. But let's get right into getting some of these pieces cut off of all of these squash. I will put a list of all of the squash that we're taste testing today down in the show notes below this video. But when we're actually taste testing each one, I'll tell you which one we're trying, obviously, for the purpose of the taste test. That makes sense. So what we're gonna do here is, oh my goodness, even this little tiny piece is very hard. get the knife through. Oh my goodness. Wow, that is a very cured skin on that squash. So I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm just gonna do small chunks like this. And we're just gonna roast this in the oven at 400 degrees. So that one was our giant green Hubbard, which truly was a giant. So this squash right here, or pumpkin, I'm assuming this is probably a pumpkin, is the only one of all of my squash that I have not been able to identify. So if anyone knows, let me show you a little bit closer up what this beautiful pumpkin is. Isn't it gorgeous? Look at the beautiful patterning on that. If anyone knows what that is, I would really appreciate you sharing that with me in the comments. I have gone through all of my seed orders. I have not been able to find the seed for this. It is not one of my own seeds, so it's not a hybrid seed as far as I'm aware of. So yeah, if you can help me out, that would be amazing. My preferred method for getting rid of all the seeds on the inside, depending on the size of the squash, but someone sent me this tool many years ago, and it's called Maddie's Squash Scooper. This one's really great because it has a little curved edge that's sharp. So it's really great for scooping things out. If you can't get your hands on one of those, a canning lid is fantastic, especially with larger squash, for being able to scoop things out quickly. And then of course, a regular spoon works as well. I'm gonna be roasting up some of these pumpkin seeds, but I'm actually not a huge fan of pumpkin seeds, so most of them will go out to the livestock. And I have heard, although I don't know if this is true or not, that pumpkin seeds are a really good dewormer for livestock, and they love them. Okay, so we have our mystery pumpkin here. I'm gonna have to do a smaller chunk, and I'm gonna have to write myself out a little map of which squash are where, because I don't think I'll be able to identify these once they're cooked. This beautiful pumpkin here is called Moringa, and it is the only Moringa that grew in my entire garden, but it is a beauty. I love the green striping on there. This one has really meaty and bright yellow flesh. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? This one is called Victory Early Butternut. It's a fantastic butternut squash. And look at all of the flesh. There's hardly any seed in there at all. Now, because all of my squash were growing in the same garden, very close to each other, I have honeybees right next to the garden. I'm not going to be saving seed. All of these seeds here are likely cross-pollinated. So the squash that I would get next year would not be the same as these squash. So that's why I don't seed save from my own. Okay, Victory Butternut is done. Okay, this one is a small wonder spaghetti squash, great size of spaghetti squash for a small family. We had stuffed spaghetti squash with a thick meat sauce. So filling this cavity with a thick meat sauce, covering it with mozzarella, and then baking it in the oven for an hour. And every single one of my kids loved it. And my youngest, spaghetti is her absolute favorite thing. She would eat spaghetti all day long. And she said this was her third favorite meal that I make was a stuffed squash, which is great because we have quite a few of them. Spaghetti squash are the longest storing squash of any squash that I have ever grown. I've had them last for up to a year. The seeds inside were starting to sprout when I cut it open, and it didn't taste very good, but it did last for a good long while. This, I thought, was a honey boat squash, which is similar to in texture and density to a butternut squash, but this is definitely not. This is a spaghetti style squash. I can tell by looking at that, how that's kind of, it's not dense. So I'm gonna have to look through my order and see, because I thought this one was a honey boat the whole time, but no, it is a spaghetti squash. This one is called a striped spaghetti squash. So I do remember that in my video when I filmed the harvest of all of the squash, that I did call this by its correct name, but I had also ordered honey boat, and I can see here that I actually didn't get any of the honey boat. So that's where the confusion happened. Let's put that one over there. And then we have one that looks kind of similar, but this one is a Delicata squash. Now we have this gorgeous pumpkin. So this was my very favorite of all the squash that I grew this year. This one's called a Jaradale. Look at how orange that is. And the skin is so smooth and beautiful. So I'm looking forward to giving this one a try. This beauty here is a Burgess Buttercup. This is one of my favorite squash. Unfortunately, not the best storage squash, but I do love the flavor of it. This cutie here is a mini blue Hubbard squash. I do love Hubbards. Hubbards have a really dense, sweet flesh to them. And they're kind of creamy is the best way to describe them. This one's called Mama Kabocha. This one is called First Taste Kabocha. I have two different kinds of kombucha for us to try. And then this gorgeous one here with that purple modeling. I know it doesn't really show up on the camera, but it's kind of a dark, dark purple little modeling on there. This one is called Shikichi Green Mini Kabocha. This beauty here is called a Burpee Butterbush, mostly flesh, hardly any seed at all. I'm excited to try this one because this is a new one for me. We have a small sugar pumpkin. We have mashed potato acorn. Really curious about this white flesh, what it's going to taste like. I don't think I've ever tried a white fleshed squash before. And I picked the smallest of all the Gete Okosomin I could find here. These are an absolutely gigantic squash. All of my squash this year are just looking so good. I'm so pleased. I'm gonna run out and cut a hunk off of a Cinderella pumpkin and a peanut pumpkin as well and throw that in the oven. I'll be back with you when these are all roasted up and we'll give them a taste test. All right, friends, we are here to give all of these a try. I made sure that I didn't eat a lot before this because I'm gonna have to be eating a lot of squash here, but we are going to start with our baby blue Hubbard squash. So this is a really easy way to cook squash. You can add just a little bit of butter, sometimes a little sprinkle of brown sugar and cinnamon on top of squash baked like this is really good. I have a couple of really good squash recipes in the Little Mountain Ranch family cookbook. I have our squash soup, which is one of our favorite soups. My kids just love it. And then I have our holiday roasted squash, which is absolutely delicious. If you don't like squash, try this recipe because I haven't had anyone that tried it yet that didn't like it. These squashes are just roasted like you saw. I did add a little bit of butter onto each one just so that the flavors were all the same, but some of them dried out a little bit in the roasting process. So just to give them a little bit of extra moisture. And you can add a little sprinkle of brown sugar and a little sprinkle of cinnamon onto a simple roasted squash like this. And it is delicious. If you were going to use squash in any recipes, I would recommend roasting it like this first because it just increases the concentration of the sugars and makes it a little bit more sweet. So let's start off with the baby blue Hubbard squash here and try this. Okay, it is, I can tell you right off the bat that it is quite a dry squash texture. Smells really good. I don't want to burn my mouth right out of the gate and not be able to taste any of the rest of them. I can tell you right away that this would make a really good pumpkin pie because the flesh is so dense. It is super dry. I don't know if I can show you. Can you see how dry that's coming out of there? So that's just the consistency of some squash like this. They're just dry like this. This would also be really good in baking and for a squash soup. I don't know that this one is the best one for roasting squash like this, just because it doesn't have a lot of moisture in it, but it still tastes really good. Also, not super sweet, kind of a mellow flavor, but good. So then we have our little kabocha squash here. So the kabocha squashes are also kind of a drier texture, similar to the Hubbard squash. Look at this. Can you see, whoops, how dry that is? So this is, you might be wondering if I had covered this with tin foil, added a little bit of extra, maybe liquid to the pan, if this would be as dry. It might be a little bit less dry, but it is really just the type of squash it is that has this drier flesh like this. This one is even drier actually than the Hubbard squash. So that one almost entirely lacks sweetness. I would say of these two, as far as a dry squash, definitely prefer the baby blue Hubbard squash to the kabocha squash. Honestly, I don't really like the flavor of that one that much. It's almost a little bit bitter, which is interesting because when I talk to people about squash, everyone always says that the kabocha squashes are their favorite, but let's try it against the other kabocha squash that we have here. This is the one that was the light blue color with the little purple specks on it. So also a dry consistency there. Also, in my opinion, has a little bit of a bitter sort of undertone to it and almost no sweetness in it. So both of these kabocha squashes, I would be using these ones, or will be using, I only have a few of each. I almost need water because they're so dry, for making soup. That would be what I would use those for, because I add a lot of other things in my squash soup, like onions and garlic and bone broth and sometimes potatoes. And then I also add coconut milk, which adds sweetness to it. So I think this one would be a good one for that, but definitely not a lot of sweetness going on in that one. So now let's try the Burgess Buttercup, which is a much more tender and less dry. A lot more moisture in it than these ones, for sure. This one has always been one of my favorites. It's so good. It's creamy. There's no dryness to it, super smooth in your mouth. It's not sweet like a sweet pumpkin flavor sweet or a butternut squash sweet. Almost like a mix between the flavor of a spaghetti squash and a butternut squash. It is still one of my favorites. We'll see once I've tried all of these, but this one is really, really, really good. So we're gonna try the Buttercup against the butternut squash. So this one is the Burpee butternut. Beautiful color, beautiful texture. Hot. So this one is what I would consider to be a mix between the Buttercup, as far as that smooth, moist texture of the Buttercup squash with a little bit of sweetness, and the dry texture of the kabocha squashes. This is a real mix between the two. The butternut squashes are probably the ones you're most familiar with. Seems to be that most people use these ones. This one isn't as sweet as some other butternut squashes that I've tried, but it is a nice squash. It's not bad at all. I actually think a combination of this one with the Buttercup squash in a soup would be really, really delicious. I feel like I need to work through all of the squash first, and then we'll move on to the pumpkins. I did roast up one of the peanut pumpkins and the Cinderella pumpkin as well, and then we have the Jaradale over here. So I'm going to stick the Jaradale with the pumpkins so we can do the pumpkins all at once, but we have one tray down. We have our moringa too, which is also pumpkin, so we'll put that over there. So now let's try this, the giant Hubbard squash. I'm very curious to know about how tender this one's going to be. Okay, so I can tell right away by looking at it and scooping it out, that it has way more moisture in it than the baby blue did. It smells a lot sweeter. That is way sweeter and better across the board than the baby blue Hubbard. So if you were to go between these two, the baby blue, it's kind of unfortunate because this is a good size for a smaller family. However, one of these big giant squashes, usually only 1 or 2 grow on each plant, would be enough to put up enough squash probably to last most families for the entire winter, that one squash. So I guess that's another way to look at it. But this has excellent flavor, lots of sweetness, great texture, a little bit drier than the Burgess Buttercup, but I would say almost equal in flavor. The Burgess Buttercup is still my favorite of all the squash I've tried so far, but this one is pretty darn delicious. Okay, so this is our other butternut squash variety that we have to try here. And I am curious to see how this one is. I actually need to taste this one again directly next to tasting this one, because this one is kind of watery, a little bit watery. Okay, so out of these two, the Burpee Butterbush is the superior one between the two. Look at how much more orange it is as well. So both for texture, sweetness, all of it. And again, this one has more moisture in it. So I think for making a soup or something, combining the two of these would be really good. But if you only had to pick one, I would definitely go with that one. Okay, let's try our Delicata. This one has lots of moisture in it. Oh my goodness. That is scrumptious. Okay, as far as butternut style squashes, this is a very butternut-esque flavor. I'd say this one takes the cake even over the Butterbush. This is an absolutely excellent squash, and how beautiful is it? And quite prolific for a small plant. This was a bush style plant that I actually grew in my high tunnel. Squash grown in my high tunnel don't do as well as the squash outside. I just had some extra room, so I threw this plant in there. And I think there was 9 or 10 squash, but I know that had it been outside, it would have been even more prolific than that. So this one would be an excellent one for like a smaller garden where you could just plant one of these and end up with probably enough squash. Although I do always recommend planting at least 2 of every plant in case you lose one of them. But this would be a good one, and I do know that these store really well too. So, okay, I gotta put my favorites up here. That one and the Burgess, definitely so far take the cake as far as the best. And I'm gonna save the spaghetti squashes to compare last. We'll continue on with the meatier ones. This one is also a pumpkin. That one's our mystery pumpkin. So we have our mashed potato, which smells really good, actually. So this is a mashed potato acorn squash. Oh, lovely texture, nice and smooth, not too dry. Oh, that's good. That's really, really good. I actually usually have a hard time growing these types of squash, any acorn style squashes up here. I don't know why. I don't know if they just require a little bit more heat than some of the other squashes I grow, but I was successful growing this one. This compared to other acorn squashes, I would say that it is less flavorful. So if you had to choose between either a white one like this one or one of the darker green ones, I would go with the darker green ones. However, I will try growing this one again next year, and I'll also try growing one of the darker green ones and see if this is just one that grows better in the north. I can't say that at this point, but it's not a bad squash. It's pretty mild flavor wise, good texture and all of that. And if you added a little sugar to it and a little bit of cinnamon, it would kind of pump up the flavor a little bit more. Now we'll try the Gete Okosomin. This is that one that can grow up to 15 to 20 pounds. It's a huge squash. The flavor of this squash is fantastic. Really good. Kind of has a little bit of a buttercup flavor mixed with the butternut flavor. It's really good. Again, this would be another good one because each squash plant grows 2 to 3 squash and they're giant, and that's all you would need to last you the entire year. So that might be a good one from that perspective. Flavor's good. It's not blow your mind delicious. It's just good. So we'll start with our sugar pumpkin here. Okay. If you want a sweetness in your squash and you eat squash and you think to yourself, this would be so much better if it was a little bit more sweet, you might actually be wanting to eat a pumpkin instead, especially a pie pumpkin. Any of the smaller sugar type pumpkins or called pie pumpkins just have more sweetness to them, and the flesh is nice and dense. The flavor of this, as far as sweetness of all of the different squash, this one is the sweetest that I've tried so far. So that is a really good one, which I knew it would be. This is kind of the standard pumpkin for making pies. Now we will do the meringue. So this is one that I have not tried before. This has really nice texture and it smells good. Good, good. It's the only one I have of these ones. So if it is really, really good, then this is the only one I have. Tastes like nothing. So great texture, lots of moisture, but actually has zero flavor. So it's probably a good thing that only one of them grew. So we'll set that one aside. That one can go to the chickens. So now we have our Cinderella pumpkins. Cinderella pumpkins are a little bit unusual in that they're a really good pie pumpkin, but they're big. They grow quite large, and usually larger pumpkins tend to be more watery and not as strong a flavor. But that is a good pumpkin. So in comparison to the sugar pumpkin, it is definitely not as strong. The flavor is not as strong and the flesh is not as dense. So between the two for actually pie making, I would suggest sticking with a pie pumpkin like this. The Cinderella though, they store really well. The flavor's pretty good, not the best, but pretty good and certainly respectable enough for pie making, soup making, muffin making, baking, all that kind of stuff. When I did this taste test 4 years ago, the peanut pumpkin was my favorite pumpkin. I believe, I'd have to double check for sure, but one of my favorites at least of all of the pumpkins that I had tried. And so I've grown it ever since. When you're not doing a direct taste comparison like this, all squash has very similar flavor. Different textures and densities for sure, but a similar flavor. So it's kind of hard to say which one is the best without a direct taste comparison like this. So I'm curious to see if I still like this one in comparison to the other pumpkins I have here to try as much as I did the last time I tried it. 100% yes. This is a delicious pumpkin. This one takes the cake over the Cinderella any day. I get attached to things, and I'm kind of a creature of habit. And so I've been growing Cinderella pumpkins now for 7 years, just kind of out of habit. And plus, honestly, they are just a gorgeous pumpkin. They're so orange and just the shape of them is beautiful. But as far as a pumpkin goes, the peanut pumpkin, so that's the one that has these gnarbly bits on the outside, is superior in every way. The color of the flesh, the density of the flesh, the sweetness of it, everything about it is delicious. It's so good. I could eat that just with some butter and some salt and pepper. That is an absolutely fantastic pumpkin. And then we have the Jaradale pumpkin. So this was the one that was my favorite with the really smooth skin. So let's give this one a try. This has the meatiest flavor similar to the Kabocha of all of the pumpkins, but honestly, the peanut pumpkin is so much better than all of those other ones that I don't really know when it comes to pumpkins for actually pie making that I will ever grow any other ones again. I'm sorry, Cinderella pumpkin, but these ones are, it's so good. It's so good. And then last up we have our mystery pumpkin here. It's not bad, but since I don't know what it is, hopefully one of you do, but since I don't know what it is, I can't recommend this particular variety. But it's not bad. And again, in comparison to the peanut pumpkin, there's no comparison there. So would definitely recommend both the sugar pumpkin and the peanut pumpkin for pumpkins because they are so good. So now we'll do our spaghetti squash. So we have our stripy spaghetti squash here. The reason that spaghetti squash is called spaghetti squash is that it kind of looks like spaghetti. Like that. And I absolutely love spaghetti squash. The flavor of this striped spaghetti squash is fantastic. You can see how it kind of peels off like that. And it is also a really good one. I already know that. Completely different squash experience than any of the meatier variety of squashes. And stuffed spaghetti squash, you can stuff it with so many different things. One of the members of the Little Mountain Ranch community stuffed it with rice and black beans and kind of Mexican seasonings and said it was fantastic. So we're gonna try that. Like I said, we usually stuff it with meat sauce and mozzarella cheese. So it kind of tastes like a lasagna. And it's delicious. Hang on, I'm just gonna wash my hands. One sec. But it is really delicious and it can work really good as a substitute if you're not eating things like pasta, but still give you kind of a pasta sort of experience. So if you cook it all up and then scrape it out of the shell and kind of loosen it up with some butter or some olive oil and then top it with whatever pasta sauce that you like, you might be pleasantly surprised because it obviously doesn't taste like pasta, but it gives you the same sensory experience because the texture is very similar. Maybe not the texture. I don't know how to explain it, but I guess it's just because it's kind of the long pasta-like shape. But the feeling of it is similar in your mouth. So definitely would recommend doing that. And I should have put our recipe for that in the cookbook, but it's pretty simple. Just a really good meaty spaghetti sauce inside of that, topped with mozzarella cheese. You could even add a little bit of ricotta cheese in there. What's another cheese you could use? Cottage cheese in there as well to even amp up that lasagna kind of experience, but it's really good. So to round this off, of the two spaghetti squashes, they're both good, but I would say the striped one is slightly sweeter, but they're so close. By far, my favorite squash of all of them was the Delicata for flavor, texture, sweetness, all of it. And then the Burgess Buttercup was a close second. I could say that they were tied. They're both really, really, really good. And then for the pumpkin, hands down, the peanut pumpkin. Definitely the best of all of them, with the sugar pumpkin coming in second. My least favorite squashes of all of these were the Kabocha squashes over here and the and the blue Hubbard. Just too dry, too kind of bitter flavored for me, but I'll be able to use them no problem to make a nice thick squash soup. So all is not lost with having those ones. Next year, I think I'm going to get a little bit more refined. Normally, I just have fun planting squash. I just plant all different kinds. I just think they're beautiful. They're fun to grow. They're really great for my livestock. So any extra that I grow, I can give to my livestock. I can give them away to people. They store easily, all the things. So I just kind of plant willy-nilly a little bit, but I think next year I might get a little bit more refined, at least with the pumpkins. There were quite a few varieties of pumpkins that I grew here. I won't be growing again. And I'll try new varieties just because it's fun to do that. But I don't think I'll grow the Kabocha squash again, which I know probably comes as a surprise to a lot of you, just because I've heard from you that the Kabocha squashes are amongst your favorites. But for me, the texture is just not where it's at. I would love to hear in the comment section below about your favorite squash and what the characteristics are of it, and even where you get it. And I'll go through that and see if there's any new ones that I would like to try for next year. And I also wanted to remind you about the Garden Harvest Party Zoom call that we're going to be doing in October. If you want to register for that, you can click the link below this video. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.